Hello, everyone. Welcome to Arash's World. We have a very special guest today, Leonard Perlmutter, also known as Ram Lev. Welcome to Arash's World.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation.
Wonderful. So, how are you doing today?
Excellent. It's a beautiful, sunny summer's day. Yeah, very lovely.
The same here. So, I'd like you to start off with introducing yourself in any way you see fit.
Well, that's an open question.
It's the toughest one. All the other questions will be easier as we go along.
Well, I guess I'm a philosopher, I'm a scientist, I'm an educator,
Mhm.
and during the past few decades, I have been very blessed by some wonderful teachers, uh, and I now practice and have experienced through personal experimentation certain truths that uh, I am desirous of sharing with people because they worked for me. Today, I'm not a kid anymore, but even though I'm in the afternoon of life, I have more energy than I ever have before. Uh, I feel that I'm more creative, more skillful. And so for me, it's been a great blessing. So I thought that I would share it with whoever has an ear to hear and an eye to see.
Wonderful. I actually feel the same way. It's like I used to be older and now I keep getting younger and more like get more energy and just the whole perspective is changing and it's quite amazing. I think part of it is maybe just naturally, but then the other part that's really important is to connect with certain feelings, certain events, and so on. And we're gonna get to that. You are the founder of the American Meditation Institute, short AMI. Now I teach French, so I really like that. Ami as friend. It would have also been good as Institute of American Meditation. I am, which would have been cool too. But I again, that's another thing. You were a disciple of the Guru Swami Rama in the Himalayas. He's also, I think, known for showing the scientists that he can control blood pressure and heart rate and so on. And just I mean, I would not compare myself to him, but I've had issues with blood pressure. And ever since I embarked on the personal experience that you say, that personal connection with certain truths, I would say, has helped me to deal with it. And when I went to my family physician, my blood pressure was perfectly fine. And she asked me, how did you do it? And then that would be then just listen to this episode of Arash's World and we'll find out. So let's talk about that. How did he do it? And what can we learn here from him and from your experiences?
His message was not about magic. His message was all the body is in the mind, and yet all the mind is not in the body. And what does that mean? It means that our greatest resource that any human being has is human thought. Human thought. Why human thought? Because human thought leads to action. I can't raise my hand without first entertaining a thought. And those kinds of actions, or even speech, lead to consequences that can bring us closer and closer to fulfillment, health, and reward, or can delay the prospect, and instead we can experience physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dis-ease or pain. So if, like myself, people are interested in good health and a healthy mind, then they too will begin to work with their mind to coordinate the various functions of the mind so that instead of having anarchy inside the mind and outside in the world, they will have peace within the mind and peace and harmony in their relationships in the world.
Having a sense of clarity but since that has happened where I see things clearly, it is so empowering, because then you realize that a lot of the things you have a lot of control over many things. Again, not everything, of course not, but your reactions to things, your perceptions to things, and that often we are limiting ourselves and we're creating this prisons, and we get trapped and it becomes a cycle. And for me, like, the unconscious has been very important to bring it out, to deal with it, so that we can free ourselves and connect closer to who we are deep inside.
Absolutely. And what facilitates that? What facilitates that is relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So relationships is what frees unconscious forces that are a million times more powerful than good intention. It
Mm-hmm.
frees them from the unconscious, and all of a sudden, it comes into our conscious mind, and we are consciously aware of a previously unconscious force. And once I am conscious of that previously unconscious force, then I can make a determination whether to serve it through speech and action and be led for my highest good, or I can learn to dance a different way with it. Instead of poisoning my body and my mind, I can transform that energy. We know in the 5th grade we've learned energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but it can be transformed. So why not transform the power of fear? Why not transform the power of anger? Why not transform the power of greed? It's certainly possible. It's not magic. What it takes is desire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for me, it was really like suffering that kind of woke me up. And without it, we are kind of like living in a comfort zone and kind of like walk around like zombies. But it's that kind of wake up call. And many people don't see it that way. And you shy away from it. You run away from it. You don't face your fears. And for me, it's like, and that's how it started for me, my quest. There was this strong, intense fear. And I tried to avoid it. It's like, I don't want to go there. But at some point, it's like, yes, I do. And it's actually not as frightening as we think. It's just like once you go through it, it's unpleasant, very uncomfortable. I wouldn't recommend it to people, but it's necessary, kind of like as a purge. And once you
Right.
get rid of that, it's amazing how again liberating that is. And you get to choose, how do I react? You're not driven by those unconscious impulses. You can stop. You're not on the defensive. You can just say, okay, how do I react to this situation? And a lot of people don't have, myself included in the past, didn't have that. We jump to conclusions. We want to attack others. And this kind of pause really helps us to put it into perspective.
That's absolutely correct. And that pause is very important. That space
Mm-hmm.
between stimulus and response, that the culture is trying the best it can to obliterate that space between stimulus and response. Because if as so many people are experiencing, if there's no space between stimulus and response, then my thoughts, my words, and my actions are going to be predicated on the limited perspective of my ego, senses, and unconscious mind, and I'm going to wind up in pain. But the culture says, oh, that's not so bad if you're in pain, because I can sell you something that
Mm-hmm.
will take away the pain. I can shoot the messenger of pain. Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's good for the economy, you see.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can learn to become detached, and that can happen very easily through meditation,
Mm-hmm.
you begin to recognize that there's actually no no connection between one thought and another thought. You see, there's actually a space between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can create a space between the stimulus and my reaction to it, that space provides me only one thing: freedom of action.
Mm-hmm.
So I can then redirect my attention in that space that I have, redirect my attention from the stimulus to my conscience, and ask the conscience, What is the thought to think? What is the word to speak? What is the action to take that will allow me to fulfill the purpose of life without pain, without misery, and without bondage?
And this conscience is really amazing. It's like it's deep intuition. It's that gut feeling that knows the answers, knows what will happen before it does. And so whenever I listen to that, and it's hard to recognize, but someone usually with practice you get better at it. And whenever I've listened to it, even though it seemed like a disastrous thing to do, it's like the worst thing you can do, the worst thing you can say in this situation, it has had very good effect. So I would highly recommend people do that, to be in touch with that. But the problem is, I can see with today's world, with today's younger generations too, is they don't have that patience because of technology evolving. In my time with computers, it would take a long time to load a website. And so for me, when it's lagging, I'm okay. It's not, I don't freak out. But I can see it with my son, who's just very impatient. It's like, why is this taking so long? And I think we're not helping ourselves with our technology, with like instant gratification and so on. And that's why I think, well, again, meditation is really helpful to slow down ourselves, our slow down time, and our responses, as you're saying, our reactions to things.
Yes, and the basic problem from my perspective is our educational system.
Yes.
Our educational system, although it can be wonderful and teach us many, many practical skills, it doesn't go far enough. Why? Because the only thing we're asked to do when we receive an education is to memorize and pass an exam to get a diploma, to get a good high paying job, you see.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm an educator myself, and so I see those limits when students are trying hard, they're being creative, and they don't do what they're supposed to do, and we're supposed to fail them. And I say, like, look, what this person is presenting is actually much better than what the other people are presenting. So thinking for oneself and coming up with your own ideas is not really encouraged in the education system.
No,
We
no, it's
want
discouraged. It's
this
discouraged.
is discourage, exactly. So this is the correct answer, you failed, right? And I don't see education that way. For me, it's the wrong answer if it's like backed up really well, is the right answer at the
Well,
same
this
time.
is part of my mission is that I am dedicated to changing the educational system
Mhm,
to include an understanding of and a coordination of the functions of the mind.
mhm,
And that's something that I would like to discuss with you.
mhm,
The, the functions of the mind are critically important because, as I mentioned earlier, the mind moves first, the body follows, and consequence follows from that. So we know what we want. Everybody wants to be happy and healthy and secure. We want loving, nurturing, creative relationships. We want purpose in life. And why not?
mhm.
So, how do we get to point B from point A? Well, we need a business plan, but no one has taught us a business plan for that, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm in the business of offering business plans, a philosophy of life. And the key, the centerpiece, is our mind because it's our most powerful aspect.
Mhm,
And right now, as I mentioned, there's anarchy in the mind. You
mhm,
see, there are four primary functions of the mind. First, that I've already mentioned, is the conscience, and the conscience is the only decision maker in the mind. The conscience makes every decision, every choice we have ever made, every choice we will ever make, every choice we are making today has been, is, and always will be made by the conscience because it is the only decision maker. The other three functions of the mind that are loud and pushy and insistent, which have a very small perspective, are only advisors. They are lobbyists.
mhm.
But because they cannot make a decision, the ego, the senses, and the unconscious mind create tremendous noise. in the mind.
Mhm.
It's relentless. And when there's so much noise in the mind, when I have a relationship that requires an action that will bring about a consequence, the conscience can only hear the loud, pushy voices of the ego, senses, and unconscious mind. And on that limited basis, it makes the choice, often which brings about pain.
Yeah.
But if we can train the mind to create a space between stimulus and response, to have the freedom of quieting the mind, let the ego say what its perspective is. Let the senses chime in what it feels is best for us. Let the unconscious mind weigh in. But after they make their presentation, let them learn to quiet down.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
in that quietude of that even mind, then the conscience, which can act as a mirror, can reflect super conscious wisdom from the intuitive library of wisdom at the core of our being. The same portion of the mind where Paul McCartney hears beautiful melodies,
Mm.
where Albert Einstein saw mathematical equations. Not that you're going to become a physicist, not that I'm going to become a songwriter, but for you and for me, when the conscience can speak it with a quiet mind, it can reflect perfect wisdom that is unique and beneficial for you and beneficial for me and all of the constellation of relationships that we have.
Yeah, I had Bob Thurman on my podcast, and his book is "Wisdom is Bliss," and I really like that notion that it's wisdom that brings us bliss and happiness. It's not ignorance, and so that is not correct when people say ignorance is bliss. The more you know, the more wisdom you have, the happier you will be. And
I,
just to
w-
go,
I would say though, unless you can put it into action,
yes, of course,
and that's the rub, in the
yeah,
face
yeah.
of this pushback from the ego, senses, and unconscious mind, with the endorsement of the reptilian brain,
Mhm.
clamoring for self-preservation and control. It's tough. We all have habits.
Yeah.
And that's why it's critically important that we start with small, seemingly insignificant experiments.
Mhm.
So food choice is a wonderful place to start. But maybe I'm not ready to give up a whole cookie. Well, maybe I am ready to give up a half a cookie
Mhm.
or a quarter of a cookie,
Mhm.
in which case not only will I benefit and be pleased, but the ego, the senses, and the unconscious mind will expand its awareness, won't be threatened by the conscience, won't be threatened by my inquiry, and in fact will benefit from it. So it gains our trust.
I liked how you're also saying that the loud noises in our heads, and I've had that too. And so I'd take a walk, I would not hear the birds, and it's just like when you quiet it down, then you listen. Oh, I never noticed them before, but now I do, and now I pay attention to it purposely, intentionally. And we do the same in conversations too. Often we don't listen to the other person because we want
Rarely.
to respond quickly, and so in that time, as we're coming up with our answer, we miss what the person was actually saying, and we assume they said something that they never did in the first place.
We think it's a ping pong game
Yeah,
or
yeah,
a tennis
exactly.
match.
Yeah,
We're already planning what our next volley is going
exactly,
to be, right?
exactly.
We're not even listening to them because
Mm.
I know what I want to say and
Yeah,
I know what I want to
and it's
convince
not
you of.
chess because the other move is
No,
important. It's just
no. So you bring up a very important point, very important, that I talk about quite often, and that is it's not about manipulating the chessboard and the
mm,
players on the chessboard. It's about what? Optimizing the mind of the chess player, because all the actions we take begin with a subtle action in the mind.
yes, Yes. So you have your 5 easy steps, and so that's to make the nation here, talking about the United States, and we have Independence Day coming up. So again, that's very important. And in the Constitution, the founding fathers, I think, have really have found something very important when they talk about a more perfect union. I love that, because it's not a perfect union, because perfection does not really exist, or if it does exist, then we've already moved on and we're in a different plane of existence. In our lifetime, we're striving for perfection. And so more perfect, we want to become more perfect beings. I think that's really our goal. So let's talk about those 5 easy steps.
Oh, yeah, that
Yes.
would be wonderful. Well, the first step is the law of karma. The law of karma simply states that thought leads to action, that's verbal as well as physical, and that leads to consequences.
Yeah. Makes
Okay,
perfect sense.
that's the first. We have to realize that.
Mhm.
The second thing that we have to realize is that all reality flows from the subtle to the gross. If it appears in the world, it has first appeared in the mind. So the chair you're sitting in, and that I'm sitting in, first appeared as a thought in the mind of a human being.
Would that be close to like Plato's ideas? I'm just thinking of that as the ideal chair, and then there are other forms that exist.
Yes, of course. But
Yeah.
where did Plato get it? Plato got it from these sages from ancient India. You
Mm-hmm.
see.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
So all reality flows from the subtle to the gross. That's why consequences comes from actions and words, and actions and words come from thoughts.
Yes.
Thoughts are subtle.
Yeah.
Actions, words, and consequences are gross in the world. Mhm.
Yeah.
So all reality flows from the subtle to the gross.
And the amazing thing is, once you change that thought, it changes the whole perspective and everything and the reaction of others. So it's kind of that choice is, do I get angry or do I smile? And it seems like minor, but it will, the ripple effects will be felt, and you're creating a completely different outcome
That's
with
right.
that. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah. That's good.
Third step.
Mhm.
Third step is to rely on our conscience 24/7 for every thought we think, every word we speak, and every action we take.
Now that seems to me hard. I mean, you say they're easy steps. That seems to me hard.
Well, the highest principle in all of life is a Sanskrit word known as ahimsa, non-injury, non-harming, non-violence. Because essentially, every relationship that we have is with ourselves.
Yes.
We think that we're separate, but that's a limitation of my brain and my senses. Yes, you have a different body. Yes, you have a different mind. Yes, you have a different personality. But all of those are subject to change, death, decay, and decomposition. And yet the same I amness, the same consciousness within you is within me. That's why Jesus, speaking as the Christ, says, love thy neighbor as thyself. Not because it's a cool idea, but because on the highest level of consciousness, your neighbor is yourself,
Yes.
with a different mind, a different body, a different set of habits.
Yeah. Yeah, Freud had difficulties to grasp that, Sigmund Freud.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But he made contributions. I don't, you know, accentuate the positive and
Mhm.
eliminate the negative.
Mhm. Yeah, 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 absolutely.
So we need to use the conscience as our guide 24/7. That's the third step. And you say it's not easy. It's not easy.
Mhm.
That's why we have to remember ahimsa, to not take on too much too soon. If
I
I've
like that.
never exercised
Mhm.
and I go to a gym and they give me this weight that's about 200 pounds, am I going to try to lift it up? No, because it would hurt me. I've never done anything like that. I don't have the muscle for it. But if I want to build muscle, I start, maybe I'll just start with the bar.
Mhm.
And if I can do that for a week or so, then I can add 2 pounds. And then maybe I'll add another 2 pounds. And within a couple of months, I'm lifting substantial weight, building muscle, and I'm not hurting myself. So, as I mentioned before, in a food choice, I don't have to give up a cookie, but maybe I have to give up a half a cookie or a quarter of a cookie right now.
Yeah.
And if I can do that, I'm providing a pleasant experience for my ego, my senses, and my unconscious mind. And they recognize that, oh, maybe this conscience is not so bad.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of positive relationship with our actions, with what we're doing. And so I find like a lot of diets are very extreme and you're suffering and you're depriving yourself. And so it's not fun. So you
No,
won't continue. And the same with meditation. I know people who want to meditate 5 days a week, right? And they say, I only get 3 days. But it's with the gym too. You do 3 days of gym work, that's pretty good. It's better than nothing. And you
I
want to
say,
kind of
if you want to learn
come
to
towards it.
meditate, meditate for 1 minute.
Yeah,
One
exactly.
minute.
Yeah.
And if that works for you and you have a good experience, add another minute,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth.
And what is meditation in action? What does that exactly
Well,
mean?
meditation is action is
Is
that's
action.
what that's the meat and potatoes of life.
Mhm,
That's about action.
mhm,
Meditation in action is about recognizing I have a relationship that will bring about a consequence.
mhm,
It trains me to create the space between stimulus and response that provides me the freedom and the time to check with my conscience, to coordinate the ego, senses, and unconscious mind so that all three are working in concert with the conscience as opposed to opposed to the conscience.
mhm.
Mhm.
And that's why I like the term mindfulness so much, because for me it's like being mindful is a lot of things, whereas like meditation is often just limited to the act of sitting still, meditating, and that's it. And there is not that connection with the action. That's why I like that term. And so it just reminds me when I was a teen, I wanted to become a Buddhist monk and go to Tibet and just meditate and get enlightened. But then I was like, well, what's the point of that? I want to have it here in this life, in this world where I live, and be able to share it, like you're saying at the beginning, to share it with others, like Bodhisattva. That is what I'm more interested in than just, reaching a high state of mind, and I'd be happy, but everybody else is not. So that's, again, the Buddha started like that. It's like, trying to spread the good news here and the experiences that one has.
That's right.
Mhm.
But it does begin with going inside and relying on our own inner wisdom to make the choices that we make in the world. And we don't take on too much too soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after we recognize that we need to use our conscience as our guide, then we have to coordinate the four functions of the mind. We have to teach, I have to parent. I have to become the parent of my ego, senses, and unconscious mind,
Yeah.
which means I have to welcome their limited perspective, to support them, and yet not let them dictate what the outcome is going to be, you see.
Yeah. Kind of
If
like a child. We raise them with love. We have patience with them, but
that's
we
right,
don't do it to ourselves often. We just want quick results. And I think
right.
that is the problem too, why people run towards drugs and why there's addiction or other kinds of addictions too. I mean, it's like a kind of escape, but it's not helping, it's not dealing with the issue. And for me, I think it's really important to find out what is causing this suffering, what's the root cause of it, and deal with it, and instead of jumping to medication and drugs and whatever else escape people use these days.
Well, meditation is very valid because it provides us the tools for meditation in action,
Mhm,
mindfulness in
mhm.
action. Without the tools,
Yeah.
we're going to just veg out,
Mhm,
and we're not going to do what has to be done, and we're not going to not do what's not to be done. So we
mhm.
need the tools for meditation. Chief among them is one-pointed attention, as opposed to multitasking, which is impossible, which
Yeah.
only depresses the immune system and depresses
Yeah.
the mind.
Yeah.
But one-pointed attention is the point of genius. That creates the space between stimulus and response. Then I can become detached.
Yeah.
Then I can access inner wisdom, this intuitive wisdom. And the more that I do that, I build the muscles of willpower.
Mhm. Mhm.
So those tools are a tremendous asset in the midst of every single relationship that I have that requires an action that brings about a consequence.
And one of my issues was emotional eating. So that was my addiction with food, as you're saying, and I couldn't stop. And I thought I couldn't stop. And then I tried intermittent fasting. And to me, that really helped to gain that control. And now it's quite easy to go without food. And I don't crave it as much. And I'm not drawn towards it. I still enjoy it very much and probably too much still. But it's that kind of sense of control. I don't have to respond to that stimulus of hunger, and often it's not hunger itself, it's just anxiety, and you try to deal with it by eating it away, so yeah.
Right? Yes, it's the same thing as going on vacation,
Yes.
or reading a good book, or going to Vegas, or whatever it happens to be. Buy a new pair of shoes. It's a little vacation, but
Mhm.
you're always going to come back to the same mind
Mhm.
and the same habit patterns and the same pain.
Yeah, yeah. And so prayer is important, and it's also for atheists. So prayers is not just for religious people. Can you
That's right.
explain that a little bit?
Sure. Well, in meditation and yoga, we're talking about self-reliance. When I go within, listen to the wisdom of the conscience, reflecting the intuitive library of wisdom at the core of my being, that which the Christians refer to as Christ, you see, uh, uh, I am becoming self-reliant. And that's the key, is to become self-reliant, not from outside, uh, uh, influences, undue influences, but to trust yourself and experiment with that wisdom. And that's the key.
Yes, yes, and it has the effects, and they've shown it. Gratitude, prayers, and all these kind of has have positive effects because they are positive feelings that we can nourish in ourselves. We can practice. We can grow,
And
and
even atheists and
even atheists. Yeah,
agnostics
yeah,
have a
yeah.
self, and
Yes,
that's it. You
yes.
can forget about the concept of God.
Mhm,
Nobody's saying that you have to
mhm,
believe in
mhm,
God. You
mhm.
see,
Yeah,
we don't need to believe in God.
yeah. I like that.
Trust yourself,
Yeah,
but trust yourself
yeah,
and experiment with that intuitive wisdom of yourself.
yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. That is very true. And so your approach, which I like very much, is because it combines philosophy, psychology, as well as science. And it's approved by science. You're backed by science, and you have a lot of health professionals who take your course, 5 Easy Steps, and it's for credits too, and they can use it. So I think it's wonderful that this is not just some idea there that you're teaching or some philosophy. It's a mix of all of these things,
That's
ancient wisdom with today's modern technology and
right.
medicine.
It's even
That combination is perfect to me. Yeah.
these courses are certified by the American Medical
Mhm,
Association,
mhm,
which, if you remember your history, was begun as the voice of the pharmaceutical
mhm.
industry. But now it has grown and it realizes the need for meditation and all of these allied disciplines to help the mind heal the body. There's a wonderful quote from William Osler, who is said to be the father of modern medicine. He was one of the founders of Johns Hopkins University in the
Oh,
United States, and he was one of the first people to bring the students out of the classroom and bring them into the hospital in a residency program to train them in real time. And Osler said, don't ask what kind of disease the patient has. Ask what kind of patient has the disease.
Yes.
What is the mind of the patient?
Mhm.
Because therein are the seeds of disease of the body.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's only really recently that we are talking about that mind-body connection. And I've heard like talk about different brains. So we have in our gut, in our heart, in our head. And I think that's really important, a kind of holistic view of like, because with medicine, it's just like you try to isolate like one thing. This is the disease, and you forget everything else about. You even forget the patient. You try to
So,
attack that disease, and it's not. That's why it's not working. It's not as effective, because you need to look at the whole and try to come up with a solution for that. Because the same thing with blood pressure, it's like take these pills, but then it will cause other issues, and then take those pills for the other issue. It's a vicious cycle. And
yes,
it's so much easier to deal with it in many cases, again, not all, but to really get to the root cause of it. And once that is solved, and I am living proof of that, it fixes a lot of your issues. And I
that's
think
right.
good health, as you're saying, we are neglecting the power of the mind.
No
But
question.
placebos show that there's
That's
evidence,
right. That's right. You're
perfect
better off
evidence.
taking a placebo.
Yeah, yeah,
And it has nothing in it. But if you
exactly.
think it does, you know,
But instead of being like conned, if we can use that to heal ourselves, and be aware of what we're doing and not just thinking we're taking a pill that is just water, but actually like healing ourselves. And I think there's a lot of doubt. A lot of people doubt the power that they have and that control that they have over events. So would you say it's really meditation that can help us connect with that and build that confidence? Or how do you
that,
deal with things like anxiety and burnout? Because those are topics I'm very interested in myself.
well, in ancient India, they had no word for stress or burnout or
Mhm,
anxiety.
mhm,
They had a word called uh, avidya, avidya,
mhm,
which basically translates as ignorance or the inability to see things as they are
mhm, mhm.
rather than as they appear. So most of us are still stuck in Plato's cave, believing that the shadows on the wall that appear are reality. It's
Yes.
not so.
No,
It's just not so.
no, no, definitely not. But then they don't treat the person well who comes back and tells them it's not so.
No, not well at all.
Gets killed in the myth, I believe. Yeah.
Because they're afraid.
Yes.
They're afraid.
Yes. So what would be non-truth? Would that be it, where we're just in that cave and we take it as reality, but it's not? Would you say that's non-truth?
Yes,
Mhm.
that's
A
right.
lot of people are in that
That's
position.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Because, essentially, if the truth be known, we are human animals.
Yeah.
We are animals. We're bright. We're cunning. We're manipulative, but we are animals.
Yeah.
So we have this reptilian consciousness still with us that separates us from one another.
Mhm.
And it's crippling
Mhm.
and it's ignorant. But
Mhm.
when you realize that really there is no space between me and you, I can annihilate the space between the two.
Mhm.
And when you annihilate the space between the two, what is there to fear? Whom is there to fear if
Yeah.
there's only one? So the first great freedom you experience is the freedom from fear.
That's exactly it. I think a lot of it, a lot of hatred, it comes out as hatred, is really fear,
That's,
and
uh,
that is the main problem. So we want to move from fear to what you're calling superconscious wisdom. And
yeah.
can you just again reiterate for us what is superconscious wisdom in your own words? How would you say that?
It's the intuitive wisdom that resides at the core of our being in this intuitive library of wisdom that is accessible by every human being through the conscience, through the conscience, and it can access it to know the thought to think, the word to speak, and the action to take that will always lead us for our highest and greatest good.
What a wonderful reflection here. And thank you so much for putting it so clearly. I just want to remind everyone, so Leonard Perlmutter, who is Ram Lev as well, and the founder of the American Meditation Institute, Ami, is that
Yes.
correct? French, Ami, friend. And you have also your own books. You have the book called Your Conscience, The Heart and Science of Yoga, and you also have the journal, and we can see that for those who are watching YouTube, Transformation. And yeah, so what exactly is Transformation here, your journal? How would we, what kind of articles do you publish? What do you deal with generally?
Well, it's a journal of yoga science
Mhm.
as holistic mind body medicine. It's about education for enlightenment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on Arash World, Leonard. Such an honor, such a pleasure to have you. And thank you for sharing all your insights, your wisdom, your knowledge. And again, the course is 5 Easy Steps, and it's with the American Meditation Institute. Thank you so much.
Thank you. God
Take
bless you.
care.